Yeah.
Do what thou wilt to be the whole of the law.
What is the law? Love your will.
Welcome. I appreciate y'all showing up on a Sunday morning. I want to start by saying that much of the research on this topic from a Thelemic perspective has been done by Martin Starr. I want to express my gratitude to Mr. Starr for the material he presents in his book, The Unknown God, which forms much of the basis for this presentation, the framework for sort of how all of this is played out. I kind of look at what Martin Starr put in The Unknown God and flesh it out, and we'll have access to a lot of the original source material that people really haven't seen, and it'll hopefully expand upon the material that's currently available in the Thelemic corpus relating to the 20th century Rosicrucian conflict. I hope you'll find this both informative and entertaining. So first of all, what is Rosicrucianism? We should always define our terms, so I'm going to briefly go over the history of Rosicrucianism. So in 1614, an anonymous manifesto was published in Germany titled Fama Fraternitatis. It told the story of Father C.R. and his journey, which led him to learn from the wise men of the East. He learned about physics, mathematics, magic, and Kabbalah. Upon his return to Germany, Father C.R. and his brothers established the Fraternity of the Rosy Cross. The brothers of the order spread throughout the world, using their knowledge to cure the sick free of charge. They wore the clothing of the people of the land in which they traveled, and they met annually at the house of the Holy Spirit. They were to each seek out one worthy successor, and the order was to remain secret for 100 years. 120 years later, the tomb of C.R.C. was accidentally discovered by the then current members of the order. Once the plaster hiding the door was removed, on the door was written, "Post 120 annos patebo," or "After 120 years, I will open." The next day, they opened the door and beheld the vault of C.R.C. And 120 is a very important number, both within OTO and Rosicrucianism in general. Quote, "There appeared to our sight a vault of 7 sides and corners, every side 5 foot broad, and the height of 8 foot. Although the sun never shined in this vault, nevertheless it was enlightened with another sun, which had learned this from the sun, and was situated in the upper part in the center of the ceiling. In the midst, instead of a tombstone, was a round altar covered over with a plate of brass, and thereon this engraven, A.C.R.C. Hoc Universi Compendium Unius Mihi Sepulchrum Feci, which translates to, "Unto the glory of the Rosy Cross, I have erected this sepulchre for myself as a compendium of the universal unity." So that translation was from Crowley and Temple of the Solomon of the King. This vault is a basis for the Golden Dawn 5=6 ritual. You can see some images there of the temple in the opening and first point of the ritual, the temple in the second point, and the temple in the third point. These are from the equinox, so we have these pretty readily available. And also you can see the Golden Dawn ceiling of the vault, floor of the vault, the circular altar, and the rose and cross. This obviously this tract had a very powerful influence on a number of people over a considerable amount of time. The following year, in 1615, a second anonymous manifesto was published in Germany titled Confessio Fraternitatis. The Confessio appears to be a follow-up tract to the Fama that talks about, quote, "the true philosophy," unquote, and justifies this Rosicrucian philosophy. Notably, it condemns Roman Catholicism and Islam alike. This manifesto reads like a call to arms for the Protestant Reformation, which began in Germany in 1517 and was well underway by this time. A third anonymous tract was published in 1616 called The Chymical Wedding of Christian Rosicrucians. This tract is quite different in style from the previous two. However, all 3 tracts have been attributed by some scholars to our Gnostic saint, Johannes Andrea. So this tract is an allegory divided into 7 days or journeys in which C.R.C. was invited into a castle filled with miracles to assist the chymical wedding of the king and queen. Notably, Andrea has been postulated to have been the founder of Rosicrucianism, and he created a mystical fraternity while studying theology and the natural sciences from 1604 to 1606. This is thought to be the first manifestation of the Rosicrucian order. Peter Reardon, who's a local Scottish Rite initiate, has brought and runs the Collegium Ritualis Écossais for the Austin Scottish Rite, it's a ritual study group, has traveled to Bad Tianik. How do you pronounce that? Do you know? Bad Tianik? Bad Tianik. Yeah, thank you. My German is worse than my French or my Spanish or my Latin, so it's awful all the way around. But this is purported to be a Rosicrucian tracing board that was moved there during Andrea's life, which depicts the journey of an initiate up through the Tree of Life and into the New Jerusalem. So Europe was abuzz with people looking for this Rosicrucian order. There were 3 tracts that were posted. There was no, for more information right here. That didn't exist, but it inspired a lot of people. And if you read these tracts, it's deeply inspirational. So some people thought that this order did not exist. Others falsely claimed to have found the order. Regardless, these tracts have inspired generations of mystical seekers and continue to do so today. Many Rosicrucian orders have been founded over time. The Rosicrucian mythos inspired the founding of the Invisible College in 1646, which the term should be familiar to everyone. That was a precursor to the Royal Society in London, which was founded in 1660. Now, the Royal Society had some ties to Freemasonry, which goes back as far as Freemasonry reportedly goes back as far as 1425, the Regis poem. With speculative masonry, not the operative sort of, we're actually there with trowels and doing work, but the speculative kind of more philosophical masonry got fully underway in 1717 with the founding of the Grand Lodge in England. There's a poem in 1638 that kind of links the two called The Muses Threnodii by Henry Adamson that says, "For what we do presage is not in gross, for we are the brethren of the Rosy Cross. We have the Mason word in the second sight. Things for to come we can foretell all right." So, in the 1750s in Germany was founded an order of the Golden Dawn and Rosy Cross. And the structure of that order was used to form the structure of the Sociétés Rosicruciana in Anglia, the SRIA, that was founded in 1865. Some of those adepts founded the Golden Dawn in 1887, uses the same structure, and the same structure is used in an RAA, which was founded in 1907. So you can see how this, from the 1600s, this has inspired adepts all the way through the 1900s and continues to inspire people today. These are very important documents. And I think some of the message is a very noble and worthy one. So the Order of the Golden Dawn and Rosy Cross claimed that the leaders of the Rosicrucian order had invented Freemasonry and that only they knew the secret meaning of Masonry's symbols. Most Masons of the time became members of this Rosicrucian order. Well, ties to Freemasonry. The Scottish Rite began in France in 1747, and the Mother Supreme Council was founded in Charleston, South Carolina in 1801. The 18th degree of the Scottish Rite is a Rosicrucian degree. The Cerneau Scottish Rite, which is an antecedent rite of OTO, was founded in 1807 and was a strong rival to Albert Pike's Scottish Rite for many years. And actually, for many years, it was the Scottish Rite in the northern jurisdiction. The northern jurisdiction came up post-Civil War and sort of, unfortunately, the Cerneau Rite became a diploma mill as some disreputable people got involved, and it totally undermined any authority that they had. And Pike's Scottish Rite in the northern Masonic jurisdiction overtook it, and people switched obediences. So our 5th degree in OTO is a Rose Croix degree originally based upon the Cerneau Rite. So to set the stage as far as the players, we kind of looked at how these three anonymous documents have inspired hundreds of years of Hermetic and Masonic and mystical seekers within the West. Well, to set the stage for this conflict, there are some other players. We need to touch base briefly on Martinism, which it's a system of mysticism and philosophy founded by Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin, and it was inspired by the writings of Martinez de Pasquale and Saint Jacob Boehme. The central idea of Martinism is the teaching of reintegration from our state in the material world to that of our rightful place within the greater body of macroprosopos, or Adam Kadmon. It additionally has a doctrine akin to that of the HGA, which is they sort of work Yeshua as their sort of heart-centered reunification aspect. So Augustine Chaboseau and Saint Gerard Ancos, who we see here, Papus, or Papu, I'm not sure quite how that's pronounced. My French, as I said, is horrible, so you'll have to bear with me, especially for the French current here. He was a member of the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor, the Hermetic Brotherhood of Light. He was also a 10th degree member of OTO in France, which we'll get into that a little bit later. In 1891, he was elected as Grand Master of the Martinist Order. So there are three main currents within Martinism. There's the Alu Kohen, which is sort of the original current. This is practical magic. This is Western style, like demonic summoning and banishing. And their idea is not so much to summon the demons and put them to use. They summon them and then banish them with love and try to get them to reunify with the body of God, that sort of thing. There's the Rue Cardiac, which is the inner path through prayer and meditation. They have some very profound techniques that are very simple, but if you work them, you can go very deep with them very quickly. It's much like our path of the arrow through the mystical path of attainment. There's also the CBCS, which is kind of a Masonic approach, like everybody has to do this Masonic initiation sort of thing with their mysteries. It's an order that was known also as a rectified rite that integrates a Martinist philosophy with ideals of knighthood. Because everybody wants to be a knight. That's awesome, right? So regarding Papus, he and Royce exchanged patents in 1908. Royce gave Papus a patent to establish the French branch of the ancient and primitive rite and made him 10th degree of OTO in France. Papus gave Royce episcopal and primatial, is that how you say it, authority in Église catholique gnostique. Royce translated the church's name to German as Die Gnostik Katholische Kirche, GKK, which he included under the umbrella of OTO and has become our Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica. So that's gone from the Gnostic Catholic Church, it's been translated into German, and now it's been translated back into Latin. Jean Bricaud changed the name of the original Gnostic Church to Église Gnostique Universelle, or EGU, later that same year. The EGU is declared to be the official church of Martinism in 1911. So much as we have EGC within OTO, and it's sort of we have our church within our initiatory tradition, Martinism also has the EGU as their church within their initiatory tradition. And it all comes from the same place and from the same people. So it's kind of interesting how that links. This will become important later on. We're still setting the stage. In 1914, World War I caused the Martinist order to go dormant. Papus died in 1916. The Martinist order was revived after the war, but the order again went dormant in World War II and was revived following that war. This has caused a lot of the continuity within the Martinist order to absolutely fracture. There's hundreds of little bitty Martinist orders that go from these different lineages. There's a lot of them in Russia. They're all over the place, and there's this general respect that You've received the initiations and the teachings, and everyone knows 2 world wars have just absolutely demolished any direct lineage other than from initiator to through the past masters to the original unknown superiors. So the reintegration of Martinist teachings, it continues today, this process of finding original documents and returning them and kind of learning from what has been scattered. Notably, for our purposes, AMORC, the group out in San Jose, has a Martinist order under its umbrella. It's a traditional Martinist order. And that's going to play into where we're going with this as well. So, brief history of Rosicrucianism in America. We need to look at who the players were. Clymer versus Lewis. Let the battle commence. So we had this guy, R. Swinburne Clymer, who we'll get into in more detail. So he claims that, so he's the kind of the successor to Paschal Beverly Randolph's Rosicrucian order, the Fraternitatis Rosicrucis. He claims that it was the first Rosicrucian order in America, and AMORC claims that it was the first. It appears that neither were really Rosicrucian orders, and both were fabricated to an extent. And it's really for good reason that Rosicrucians traditionally do not refer to themselves as Rosicrucians, much as Sufi masters don't refer to themselves as Sufis. They're merely seekers who are doing the work. If you see somebody saying, I'm a Rosicrucian, that's a good sign that there's an unfortunate amount of ego involved. And interestingly, this is a pronunciamento number 1. You'll notice that this is the announcement of the founding of the ancient and mystical order of Rosicrucis, AMORC, in accordance with an official manifestation, OTO, in February 1915. Interesting. We'll get into this in more detail. So, yes?
It looks like the OTO was penned in there, like it wasn't.
It was. So that is a document that's in the New York Public Library, and there's some dispute about that. AMORC says no, it was defaced later, as they well would. But there's a document where someone has looked at the penmanship, and one of the original signers of the document seemed to have the same penmanship. So it seems that one of the original signers actually wrote that in. And we'll see the gauge of amity from OTO later and some documentation that show that it's kind of interesting that that was pinned in.
They could always age it. They could always age it and see how old the ink is.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Well, within... Yes, and I doubt there is any motivation.
Has the money.
But not the motivation. No. So,
they already have their.
this is from Clymer's book. We're going to see a lot of pieces from that. The exclusive right to use Rosicrucian names, legally determined for the first time in America, is in a proceeding in Pennsylvania before the Secretary of the Commonwealth. The Randolph Foundation of the Authentic Order of the Rosy Cross in America filed its applications with the Secretary of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania under the law for the registration of its names, long required and preempted by prior use, thank you. H. Spencer Ewis, the Baron Munchausen of the occult, and fabricator of the spurious AMORC, claimed the right to use all such Rosicrucian names and protested against the granting of said applications. After hearings extending almost a year, the applications of the Randolph Foundation were granted, and the claims and protests of Mr. Lewis and his AMORC were overruled. So, you're going to see some gnarly language with the way these guys were going back and forth. And you'll see the good name of Rosicrucianism dragged firmly through the mud. So we're going to get into the foundism of FUDOFSI, the Fédération Universelle des Ordres et Sociétés Initiatiques. It's founded in 1936, quote, to protect the sacred liturgies, rites, and doctrines of the traditional initiatory orders from being appropriated and profaned by clandestine organizations, unquote. So we'll look at what orders were involved, and then we're going to contrast it with their rival order. The Ordre de la Rose-Croix Universelle, Ordre de la Rose-Croix Universitaire, Ordre Kabbalistique de la Rose-Croix, Confédéré des Frères Illumines de la Rose-Croix, AMORC, USA, Militia Crucifera Evangelica, Ordre Ancien et Mystique de la Rose-Croix, AMORC, Switzerland, Société Alchimique de France, Ordre des Samaritans en Canus, all right, Ordre Hermetiste, Tetramagiste et Mystique, or Ordre Pythagorician, Ordre Martiniste de Synarque, Fraternité des Polaires, Ordre Masonique, Oriental de Memphis Mizraim, Strict Observance, Co-Masonic Order of Memphis Mizraim, and L'Église Gnostique Universelle. There's the EGU. So FUDOFSI was eventually disbanded in 1951 after Ralph Lewis, which is H. Spencer Lewis, the founder of AMORC's son, criticized the FUDOFSI dignitary for having a problem with AMORC for admitting African-American initiates. So probably rightly so at that point, taking a stand and saying, no, we're going to step away. But this was an attempt to solidify as sort of a power grab by a lot of orders, saying we are the legitimate inheritors of Rosicrucianism and the Western mysteries. These are the people doing this stuff. Everyone else is a spurious order. So FUDOFSI, the Fédération Universelle des Ordres, Fraternités et Sociétés Initiatiques, that's a mouthful, was established in defense of the orders and societies that were not involved with FUDOFSI. So we have the Order Martinistique de Leon, I don't know, the Église Gnostique Universelle, wait. The Order of Knight Masons et Le Cohen of the Universe. The Ancient Primitive Rite of Memphis Mizraim, wait, what? Oh, another one. The Order de Saint Graal, the Ordo Templi Orientis, Switzerland. Oh, Swiss OTO, always getting into trouble. The Fraternitas Rosicruciana Antigua, which was founded by an OTO member who, Arnaldo Cromheller. The Fraternitatis Rosicrucis, which was founded by Clymer, who we'll get into great detail about. The Ordre Kabbalistique de la Rose-Croix, which is a different lineage from the one in FUDOFSI. The Rite Écossais Rectifique, the rectified rite. The Brotherhood of the Illumined Brethren of the Rose-Croix. Very fancy names. So real quick, the EGU, I'm going to touch base on this because this is a direct tie into us. Constant Chevalion headed he was the patriarch of EGU after Jean or Johnny Bricaud. There was a schism, and a guy named Victor Blanchard had a branch of EGU that became part of FUDOFSI. So that kind of goes hand in hand. And Blanchard broke with Bricaud and formed his own Martinist order that joined FUDOFSI. And the original EGU and Gerard Oncols's Martinist order went with FUDOFSI. So this is the original EGU from Papus. So the Constant Chevalion headed FUDOFSI, and he was murdered by the Gestapo in World War II. It's a very sad end to his story. FUDOFSI did not survive the war or the death of its leader, and little's actually known about what went on with them. We have not much in the way of documentation, other than that they opposed FUDOFSI. So the Rosicrucian conflict really boiled down to a power struggle between two men, Lewis and Clymer. So we'll touch base on both of them. It's a history of Harvey Spencer Lewis. There he is, looking like very, very documentary-like with his globe and in his study. As far as his Rosicrucian bona fides go, this is from Martin Starr. Lewis stated that his Rosicrucian credentials came from the, quote, French Rosicrucians in Toulouse, unquote. It was apparently written in such poor French that Crowley suggested to Lewis that, quote, if they had mastered all the secrets of nature, those of the elementary rules of French grammar still baffled them. Yeah. Lewis was given an honorary 7th degree in OTO by Royce as a gage of amity to AMORC in 1921. This was done without Crowley's knowledge. Here's a copy of that gage of amity. You can see Ordo Templi Orientis, Fraternitatis Lucis Hermeticae at the top. And you can see the seals. That seal should look pretty familiar to some of you.
What's the practical consequences of a gauge of amity?
That's a very good question. So that is from what I understand, because I've never received one. It's an honorary recognition. There's no authorization to initiate. There's nothing. It's just saying we recognize you. Here's an honorary degree, and it's sort of an exchange of patents so that.
No harm, no foul. What you do is what you do, and we see that. What we do is what we do, and we see that you see that.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And that's really it.
Okay.
They don't learn grips or
David,
anything like
would
that.
would that include initiatory rights, documents?
No.
Okay, so it's nothing. It's just it's an honorary degree.
It's an honorary degree in name only, as if someone at a university received an honorary doctorate. They gave George Bush one of those. I mean,
we like what you're doing, but yeah.
Right, we like what we're doing. Royce thought favorably of Lewis at the time and gave him that. Real quick, regarding Royce, he was a magus of the High Council in Germania of the Sociétés Rosicruciana and Anglica, and that's from a letter of authorization dated from 1902 from Westcott. So he had a link to a Rosicrucian order already, and so that you can see that kind of Rosicrucian lineage from SRIA kind of going through OTO, through Royce. But interestingly, according to Starr, he said that Crowley had also offered Lewis the same honorary degree in OTO in 1918. That's 3 years earlier, as well as a grade of Magister Templi if Lewis was willing to swear the oath. Wisely, he was not. As well as membership in the Order of the Illuminati. Starr indicated that it's unclear whether Royce ever knew of this offer. So interesting. So Crowley and Lewis had some back and forth. Now, Clymer claimed that Lewis was a fellow craft Mason who had been blocked from further advancement and held a meaningless honorary Masonic degree from Royce. Well, kinda, yeah. This did not make Lewis a Rosicrucian, since in Clymer's view, the, quote, despised black cult, unquote, of the OTO was from the start a clandestine co-Masonic order and not a Rosicrucian one. And interestingly, this is from Clymer's book. It's a reproduction of a circular in French used by the OTO in 1918, inviting women of all nations to organize female Masonic lodges and to form an international alliance of co-Masonry, which Lewis says was a call for a Rosicrucian convention held 10 years prior in Paris. So it's interesting. So this is OTO opening up and saying formally, we're initiating women. And there was a time early on in OTO's history where it was just going to be Masons doing Masonic stuff, and then early on they realized, no, let's bring in women and let's do something a little bit more. And this is sort of the second page of this. So Crowley on Lewis. Lewis and Crowley came into contact back in 1918 when Crowley and Jones lived in New York. There's a picture of Crowley, and this was in Clymer's book. That's Crowley looking handsome, dignified, and official. At least they used that instead of some bizarre picture of him. Lewis was reportedly arrested in New York in 1918. He was selling bonds, which represented AMORC as a recognized branch of an international organization. So he was charged with larceny. The French charter, the Toulouse charter, with the very poor grammar of French, was seized during his arrest, and after he was charged, Lewis denied that AMORC held any authority from a foreign country. Huh.
Lewis was arrested?
Lewis.
Oh.
Yeah. And he denied authority from any foreign country. Well, that's interesting. Crowley repeatedly stated that he disapproved of Lewis as, quote, an ignorant charlatan, unquote, but offered to post bail for him, believing him to be framed. The charges against Lewis were eventually dropped. That's from Starr's book.
What year was that, Dave?
That is 1918.
1908
Yes.
or 18?
18.
He founded AMORC by then, hadn't he?
I believe AMORC was founded in 1915.
Yeah.
So, but he was trying to get money for AMORC and he got in trouble for trading on this external authority, this authority from outside the United States, which he later said, no, we actually don't have authority. So he got in trouble for that in the very beginning. So in 1922, this is also from Starr, quite interesting. Jones attended a lecture by Lewis in which Lewis asked about AMORC's connection, was asked about AMORC's connection to OTO, and Jones reported to Royce that Lewis stated, quote, if you mean that filthy, immoral outfit run by Crowley and Jones, etc., but I do hold honorary high degrees from the head of the order from which Crowley and Jones never have had and never will have any authority, unquote. Yeah. Jones was there. He and his wife objected vigorously, and Jones said that he represented Royce's interests. And how dare you make false statements in public against your brethren? Indeed. So in 1935, Crowley was bankrupt. He formally filed bankruptcy and thought, hey, this AMORC thing's going pretty good. Lewis's only claim to authority comes through OTO. So I wonder if he might be able, I went to bat for him when he was actually charged in New York back in 1918. I wonder if he could help me out with a little bit of cash. So in 35, Crowley had reached out, and Lewis wrote back and had nothing to do with it. He, considered Crowley's OTO as a spurious organization, and that Royce was a true successor to John Yarker, which actually Crowley held patents from John Yarker to work all these degrees as well. And he also considered Royce as a leader in European Rosicrucianism, so he definitely put him on a pedestal. And he believed that Crowley was at best a usurper of Royce's work. Wow. Lewis dismissed Crowley's claim to the 97th degree, the imperial hierophant of the Rite of Memphis, and didn't discuss, quote, the European rites of Memphis and Mizraim, unquote, with Crowley, because basically they were considered clandestine in the United States, and AMORC had, I imagine still has, a lot of Masonic membership. So with that cross membership, he did not want to run afoul of Masonry, otherwise those members would, by obligation, be unable to be a member of both orders. Starr speculates that Lewis did not work the rite in the... Oh, yeah, I already touched on that. Lewis also indicated that Masonry and Rosicrucianism were separate and distinct movements that were not combined in AMORC. However, we see what a muddy statement that really is. In 1935, Crowley writes, quote, there seems no doubt that you possess a charter from Royce, and this is automatically continued by me as his successor, unquote. Lewis did not want that kind of link to Crowley at all. Interestingly, Lewis borrowed the Golden Dawn's Rosy Cross as an image, right? And he took the Thelemic motto, love is the law, love under will. And in his book Militia from 1933, Lewis claimed his authority derived from OTO. That's from Brother Richard Kaczynski's work in Perturaba.
David?
Yes.
Quick question. The caption of that last photo and on a slide a couple back as well referred to the secret chief of the OTO. It's not a term I usually see in connection with the OTO. And Brother Dionysus, feel free to chime in too if you saw that term in connection with it at all. But was that just kind of a weird...
That's Clymer. Clymer gets very confused about the language. He went through the Order's foundational documents, and you'll see that in his Rosicrucian Fraternity in America, which is like, Volume 2 is 800 plus pages, Volume 1's pretty massive too, and it's all bile and vitriol. And you're going to see some direct clips from it, and I'm not even kidding. And he gets very confused as far as terminology, like he thinks Crowley founded the order, and he, for some reason, and by the secret chief, that's our head of the order, he just gets very confused with this terminology because he doesn't really understand what he's talking about, and he never really did. There's my strong statement, jeez.
So he an outer head of order there.
Yeah. Okay, so this is from a letter from Crowley to Lewis, 1935. Quote, "My point is that it does not matter who claims to be the head of an order which has no existence in fact," referring to the Rosicrucians. "The only rituals workable under modern conditions are those of the OTO, written by me at the instigation and under the supervision of Royce. The only thing that matters is the ultimate secret of the OTO, which is not disclosed below the 9th degree. That secret is important because its possession confers real powers. I do not know whether you yourself are in possession of it, as you have not claimed any degree beyond the 7th. You deny very emphatically that the Scottish Rite and the rites of Memphis and Mizraim are any factor in your claim, yet the only document on which you base your claim is devoted to these rites as concentrated in the OTO, which is printed in big type right across the diploma. And nothing whatever is said about Rosicrucians. Furthermore, my own private seal is at the foot of this document." And by the seal, Crowley was referring to the OTO lamen that was right in the middle that I pointed out. Crowley, Starr indicates that Crowley had finalized that design based on several earlier lamens that were used that we kind of see in our history. And Crowley added the Egyptian Eye of Horus to the lamen, which replaced the All-Seeing Eye of God, which is a traditional Masonic symbol. And regarding OTO's Rosicrucian authority, in 1936, Crowley wrote to Smith, quote, "It is unquestionable that Lewis has appropriated numerous phrases and symbols from the equinox. It is also to be particularly noticed that we do not make any claims to be the Rosicrucian order. You will also notice that in One Star in Sight, we do not explain the meaning of the letters R.C. This is in accordance with the tradition of the Rosicrucian fraternity. This tradition has been violated by Lewis, and his action cannot be approved by us," unquote. So, Smith, in 1936, writes, "No stress on any Rosicrucian authority has been made by us at any time. The OTO sails purely under its own banner, nor will it ever be made, if for no other reason than that the Rosicrucian order is entirely defunct in respect to that which alone gives it any vitality, namely the knowledge of the secret of the Gnosis, which at this date reposes in the sanctuary of the OTO and none other. Mr. Lewis's honorary 7th degree certificate is in no sense of the word a charter or authority for operating the OTO degrees, which, however, he does not claim to be doing." So Lewis had a stroke. Crowley thought, now's the time to strike. And wanted to file a claim to own AMORC and all its property on behalf of the OTO, because the OTO's property at the time, as you see in our foundational documents, is divested in the members of the sanctuary of the Gnosis. He reasoned that Lewis had claimed to operate under the jurisdiction of OTO, and Lewis had given no further authorization beyond his OTO patent in the Toulouse Charter, which Crowley considered to be a fake. However, Crowley's OTO charters from Royce, as Starr says, were left with his bankruptcy attorney and were not readily available. He had his honorary 33rd degree certificate from the ancient primitive rite, as well as a dispensation from Yarker, but that wasn't really enough proof to stand up in a court of law. It's not like he had digital copies of this stuff on hand. Crowley tried to continue to gather support for the lawsuit until Lewis's death in 1939, and the lawsuit really didn't go anywhere. Now, Crowley wrote to Smith in 1936 on Lewis. I think Lewis is one of that type of people whom it is impossible to class either as honest or as dishonest. I'm fairly sure that he has every intention to defraud, but I also think that he has certain magical knowledge and power. There is also a certain excuse for his method. For instance, he has taken this silly book of Franz Hartmann's, Among the Rosicrucians, Franz Hartmann also being a founder of OTO, which can be bought on the open market for $1 and issued it chapter by chapter as a secret instruction. It's something like $40.
It sounds like how AMORC works.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's talking about. Now, provided that one has a sincere wish to get somebody to read that book, I think he has found the only way to do it. And dealing as he is with the lowest type of barbarians, one could admit he had no option. Wow, Crowley, damn. All right. So,
I couldn't read it all.
so let us now examine Lewis's claim to hold a charter from Royce. Crowley says, the only document so far put forward, apart from the contemptible Toulouse forgery, is a facsimile reproduction number 20 in Clymer's book. You'll see facsimile production number 20. This is the original from Clymer's book, seal of OTO. You'll note that this has my own private center and the seal of the 5 seals in the bottom. And this was designed entirely by myself. We are also in touch with the engraver who cut the die, if any question arises about the date. But I do not see how this can happen, as the document was issued evidently before Lewis received it. The document is dated 1921. At this time I was in retirement in Sicily, but in communication with Royce and Basel, and I think Munich. This document appoints Lewis, who it recognizes the member of the 95th, not the 96th degree of the Rite of Mizraim, and the 7th degree, not 10th degree of the OTO, to be an honorary member, not a full member, and to represent our sovereign sanctuary as a, quote, gauge of amity near the Supreme Council of the AMORC at San Francisco, California, unquote. This document is then a diploma of sorts, as it says itself. It is not a warrant, it is not a charter, it confers no authority whatever, and even as a diploma, it is revocable. So there's the from the mouth of the beast, there's the answer to the question. Brother Shettle in Norway writes, quote, in the late 70s, a letter from the OTO was written to AMORC, which asked them to discontinue their use of the lamen of the order, which you can see in their Liber 777. There's an earlier version of the lamen. Our current version. Their 777 is much different from ours, as well as stating that any authority that the AMORC had through the OTO had been declared void and null. The latter was prompted by the policies of AMORC at the time that made it difficult to remain a member of both orders. AMORC continues its use of the lamen to this date, but as long as it's only used as private ornament, no legal steps will be taken, unquote. So, interesting that they still use our lamen. Crowley writes about this in Confessions, just a little bit. He touches on it, doesn't name names, but it's very brief. So he's talking about Lewis. He writes, his claims were grotesquely absurd. For instance, he said that I don't know how many knights of England and France, the most improbable people, were Rosicrucians. He said the order was founded by one of the early Egyptian kings and professed to have documentary evidence of an unbroken hierarchy of initiates since then. He called the order Rosicrucis and translated it Rosicross. He said that in Toulouse the order possessed a vast temple with fabulous, magnificent documents, an assertion disprovable merely by consulting Baedeker, which was a travel guide of the time. He said that Rockefeller had given him $900,000 and at the same time sent round the hat with an eloquent plea for the smallest contributions. He professed to be a learned Egyptologist and classical scholar on terms of intimacy with the most exalted personages. Yet, as in the case of Peter, his speech betrayed him. He was a good chap at heart, a genuine lover of truth, by no means altogether ignorant of magic, and a great fool to put up all this bluff instead of relying on his really good qualities. This is interesting. This is Bricaud writing to Clymer after Clymer sent him some information. And Bricaud says, "Dear sir," remember, this is from the Gnostic Catholic Church that ours derives from. This was the patriarch. "Dear sir, I received your letter in due time through the courtesy of Mr. Charconac of Paris. With your letter of February 8th, I received 2 copies of the Mystic Triangle, for which I thank you. I'm quite interested in all you say in your letter, and although I do not read English very fluently, the articles you wanted me to read have drawn my attention to the groundless claims made in them. As to the Grand Lodge of the Rose-Croix in Toulouse, France, I very candidly declare to you, dear sir, that I've never heard of it. Even in Toulouse itself, it is absolutely unknown. Nobody in France knows anything about the Rose-Croix of Toulouse. To belong to the Martinist order, as you know, you are required to have the 3rd grade, the master's degree of Masonry. Only on this condition is it possible to join the Martinist order. That is not the case today. With the same mail, I am sending you several copies of the Annales Initiatiques. In one of these numbers, you will find an historical account of the Martinist order. Will you accept, my dear sir, my thanks and best regards, fraternally, J. Bricaud, Grand Master." This?
You have to be 3rd degree in AMORC to join their Martinism.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Well, that's interesting. This is an initiate in France who's internationally recognized and respected, who's never heard of these Toulouse Rosicrucians. Huh. All right. So from Perturabo, A.C. Crowley was writing to Crumheller in 1936. He said, Spencer Lewis was never a disciple either of Royce or myself in any sense of the term. He had been knocking about for years trying to run a fake Rosicrucian order. He cast about everywhere for authority, and when I first met him in New York in 1918 EV, he was showing a charge, supposedly to be from the, a charter. I see, that was my misspelling, my bad. Supposed to be from the French Rosicrucians in Toulouse. He devoted so much time to the conquest of the innermost secrets of nature that he had not been able to spend any to learn French. Now, even in New York, there are a few people who know French. And this ridiculous forgery made him a general laughingstock, so that he withdrew it. Now, in the last 2 or 3 years of his life, Peregrinus Royce was sick, impoverished, and desperate. He was anxious at any cost to find people to carry on his work. He accordingly handed out honorary diplomas up to the 95th degree, and sometimes very foolishly the 96th. This is how people like Spencer Lewis and Trenker got their standing. It's amusing to notice that my own personal seals on the documents quoted by Lewis as his authority and the words Ordo Templi Orientis are sprawled all over the document. Either he had no authority at all or he had mine. If he had none, he can be prosecuted. If he had mine, he must account for the $900,000 odd which he had amassed in the last few years. It's Crowley's thoughts on the matter. So, I've got some like, here's AMORC's Rosicrucian Park, $900,000 some odd dollars, right? Well, they have a fancy temple in San Jose. Has anyone ever been there? Yeah, it's.
I grew up down the block from it.
My first degree there.
Oh, there you go. First AMORC or OTO? Oh, nice. Well, it's beautiful. It's really nice. I've got on my Facebook, I've got a picture of me standing next to a Sphinx in Rosicrucian Park. It's a great space, but what was it founded on, really? We'll see a few slides of note. Here's an old ad. Are you a robot, or do you think for yourself? From the Rosicrucian Brotherhood.
God, it almost sounds like a Scientology ad.
I know. Okay, and this is this noble fraternity. That's now, are you a robot? Mental poisoning, thoughts that enslave minds. Look at the laser eyes. Free sealed book, Rosicrucians.
That's awesome.
Is it protection against or how to?
Yeah. Will man create life? The Rosicrucians, 1950 ad.
What's some Tesla coils?
Yeah.
Really big ones.
The secret method for the mastery of life. Knowledge that has endured with the pyramids. It's kind of like that Mysteries of the Unknown. Do you remember those ads? I fashioned a hanger into an ankh and I pointed at Stonehenge and I was knocked unconscious. You know, it's kind of ridiculous. The dark continents of your mind. Strange things happen here.
What's coming out of his head?
I don't
It
know.
looks like
The
string
dark
and
contents of his mind.
The mysterious world within you in Scientific American. Like, really? Like,
I understand the attraction of free books, but what's with the sealed books? Why?
Well, the idea is
No
I
keys?
don't know.
Might
You're right.
so no one else can read it.
I like the fine print at the bottom of this ad. Remember, the Rosicrucian Order is not a religious organization.
Yes, you're right. So it's kind of, I mean, if you think about what I was talking about these original 3 documents that inspired seekers for hundreds of years and continue to do so, look what they're doing to this. This is like, get your free X-ray specs today. I mean, Crowley had a real point. Like, he can't support Lewis doing this to the Rosicrucian Brotherhood. It's ridiculous. And it's laughable. So we're going to hit Clymer now, the other guy here. And we can't hit Clymer without talking about Randolph. Well, that first quote's interesting from the Mysteries of Euless in 1874. Will reigns omnipotent, love lieth at the foundation. Huh, that sounds kind of familiar a little bit. So there's Randolph, and my fiance said that he looks like Leonardo DiCaprio. Yes, indeed. And once you've seen it, it cannot be unseen. It's really frightening. So we have to hit on, I'm going to hit on Randolph real quick and see how Clymer ties in, because this is his claim to authority was through Randolph. So Randolph was a ceremonial magician. He was a sex magician who founded the Rosicrucian Order in Boston in 1858. He was reportedly a member of the Hermetic Brotherhood of Light, which is an antecedent member of OTO, and in our higher degrees, reportedly, we still work those. I don't know. And his sex magic theories are reportedly form much of the basis for those taught within the sanctuary of the Gnosis of OTO. He's also a recipient of the Order of the Lion from our Grand Master Sabazius as being, quote, an American master of the very current central to the magic of the new aeon, unquote. That was in the essay that was written in defense of Randolph for the Order of the Lion. So Clymer had a Rosicrucian connection through a guy named Edward Brown, who was heir to the tripartite Rose Cross Order, the Temple of the Rosy Cross, and the hierarchy of Euless, all founded by Randolph. Clymer received this star says that Clymer received the first 2 of 9 degrees in Randolph's system, quote, before his literary piracy of the Randolph corpus aroused Brown's ire, unquote. So Brown apparently alleged that Clymer merely bought the books of Randolph from his widow and reprinted them to give credence to his claim to being a Rosicrucian Grand Master, unquote. That's from Starr. So Brown and George Winslow Plummer, who's the imperator and supreme magus of the Societies Rosicruciana in America, mutually recognized each other's Rosicrucian work as legitimate and formed an alliance in 1918 to allow cross-membership and close the door on Clymer. Now, this is not the SRA from the Societies Rosicrucia and Anglica. Like, they authorized a branch in the U.S., fine. Like, that's still working through Masonry today. But this was a splinter from that group that was made to include seekers who were not Master Masons. So it expanded it outside of Masonry. So this is sort of an offshoot of the legitimate SRA lineage. And they're just recognizing each other to bolster really nothing. So Lewis maintained that Clymer had no Rosicrucian authority whatsoever. And in his, interestingly, in his book Euless, Randolph wrote, quote, I studied Rosicrucianism, found it suggestive, and loved its mysticisms. So I called myself the Rosicrucian, and gave my thought to the world as Rosicrucian thought. And lo, the world greeted with loud applause what it supposed had its origin and birth elsewhere than in the soul of P.B. Randolph. Very nearly all that I have given as Rosicrucianism originated in my soul, and scarce a single thought, only suggestions have I borrowed from those who in ages past called themselves by that name. There's Clymer, and Randolph just admitted to have created all of his work whole cloth, which is fine. You don't have to say you grabbed everything from the Rosicrucians. Randolph's work's excellent. Clymer believed he was the second coming of Christ under the name Manisis. He wrote about Manisticism and trying to bring people under this umbrella of him being the second coming of Christ. So Crowley wrote a bit about Clymer, not too much. Correspondence from Crowley and Lewis from 1914. Crowley referred to Clymer as an ignorant swindler who was shown the door after a few minutes when he called on Crowley. Crowley had nothing to do with it. And, all things considered, this guy received up to the second degree in Randolph's system. And after Randolph died, he basically hijacked the whole system with very little knowledge of it and claimed to be the head of the system. And eventually, with his press and his continual messaging, people bought in, and he hijacked the whole order. So, look at some of this. Crowley wrote about Clymer's Rosicrucian fraternity in America. These are clips directly from that, and I'll touch base on it in a second. He wrote that the Rosicrucian fraternity in America, quote, is filled with nothing whatever but hatred. It is to me an extraordinary circumstance that a man should be so eaten up with passion that he could put hours of time and quite large sums of money into such a monument of abuse. Even in the Middle Ages, I don't recall any controversy so prodigiously documented. An interesting point is that Clymer seems to have acquired almost magical powers through his fervor. He has obtained possession of documents which even I, who've had my nose to this business since 1912, have never heard. Interesting. Like, look at this. OTO established by Crowley in 1911. It will be remembered that Aleister Crowley became active shortly before 1909 and established the AA in London. That in the year 1911, he established the OTO, Order of Oriental Templars, Ordo Templi Orientis, as a part of the AA and its black magic activities. The sex teachings of the OTO had adopted the black magic of Crowley, the razzle-dazzle of sex, Lewis's attempt to escape his black magic. Baphomet, the evil one, black magician. Is the OTO a Rose-Cross order? This question conclusively sealed. Aleister Crowley, most notorious of black magicians. The Lewis Charter bears the black seal of the OTO. It must be concluded that AMORC's teachings are not Rosicrucian teachings. Like, these are headings that I scanned directly out of that book.
Oh.
Yes, that's directly out of the book. That's where I got those from. I scanned it and clipped it, and there you go. The language in it is vitriolic.
And this is Clymer.
This is Clymer. Crowley called this a monument of abuse. It truly is. Hundreds and hundreds of pages of it. Let me tell you some of the chapter titles in Volume 2, which is over 800 pages in that volume alone. The chapter titles are quite amusing. Chapter 1. The Great Conspiracy Bugaboo is a shield for an occult fraud. Chapter 2. The Ancient Defense of Confusion as a device to escape the truth. Chapter 3. Personal attacks, countercharges, falsified and manufactured evidence, and an attempt to destroy the real to perpetuate a spurious RC order. Chapter 4. The Imperator defends himself with the meanest tricks of his black art, using mutilated documents and petty chicanery. Chapter 5. Supplemental review of the hodgepodge claims of claptrap authority asserted for this fraternal swindle.
How do you really feel?
I know, right? Chapter 6. controlled committees and conventions used as a smokescreen for a family racket. Its true nature and exact status revealed. And Chapter 7. Ballyhooing propaganda, show window dressing, big bluffing, challenging to public debate as a fire escape from the burning truth. So all of that is in reference to, so they wrote volume 1 of this, Clymer did, with all this like vitriolic, like almost hate speech towards Lewis. And Lewis formed a committee at one of AMORC's conventions, a committee for the defense of AMORC basically, and said, look, we need to respond to these charges. We've been playing the high road. We've been like not even acknowledging them. And he continues to publish this stuff, and people, this is really getting around. He's spending so much money putting these books out there, and people are like, it's looking bad for AMORC. We need to say something. So he published a very thin volume called The White Book D. And the White Book D, like you can, it's really hard to get a hold of, but it's actually out there in electronic format on Scrib-D right now. So I'm thankful for that, because otherwise I would not have been able to find it very easily. This second volume of the Rosicrucian Fraternity in America was a response to AMORC's White Book D. Now remember, the White Book D was a tiny volume where a committee kind of looked at this stuff and kind of made some photocopies of some stuff and said, look, here's our response to some of these charges. Fair enough. We're going to go into some of this in a little bit of detail here in a moment. But then Clymer writes an 800-plus page volume responding to this with nothing but vitriol and bile. So the AMORC White Book D, there it is, Adi Alterum Partum, or Here the Other Side. It reports that Clymer charges that the Salem cross that Crowley used was used by no one else but Crowley. AMORC rightly points out that the cross in question was used in Masonic documents. Indeed, it's the cross of the Sovereign Grand Inspectors General, 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite. Here it is. Crowley had the right to use it, and as an honorary 7th degree of OTO, Lewis had the right to use it as well.
That's not the Salem cross. Salem cross is the triple cross.
The triple. Yeah, it's, there's some fuzziness about, this is the Baphometic cross.
And this is a different distinction. They're saying that Lewis is not actually using Crowley's 11 folds.
But you see how Clymer gets very confused
Yeah.
with this stuff. Yeah, the Salem cross traditionally used in the 33rd degree is just like the vertical line and these 3 horizontal lines. So you'll see that. And then the 11-fold seal has the crosslets added to it. And so Clymer gets all of this completely confused and doesn't know what even any of this stuff means or where it came from. So you can see this is from the White Book D, directly from it. You can see it shows 2 upper photos of Masonic documents issued in Romania in the year 1882 when Crowley was a child. Note that the principal signature is preceded by one of the kinds of crosses that Clymer says was invented and controlled by Crowley and never used by others. Other photos shows Masonic letterhead printed in Boston in 1890 containing the same mark. The lower photo shows illustration from the history of Freemasonry. It's a signature of an eminent Freemason and high officer of the Knights Templar. Note the cross before his signature. The other crosses show the different forms found on old Rosicrucian Masonic documents. So he presents evidence, like pictorial evidence, that, hey, this stuff actually, it has a tradition, and it did exist before Crowley. So, back off, Clymer. It's not Crowley's Black Seal. So, in the White Book D, AMORC really leans on the bona fides of OTO as a Rosicrucian order and a voice. You can see this is from the White Book D. They claim that OTO was, quote, affiliated with the genuine Rosicrucian organization as far back as the 17th century in Europe, and in 1895, John Yarker, eminent Masonic historian in London, was supreme magus of the OTO. Wait, what? Theodore Royce, Peregrinus, was the elected successor to Yarker. They point out that the OTO gauge of amity was granted by Royce. So they're very confused about the origin of OTO, apparently. You can see that they've got some of the you've got Papas here, you've got Tedder, you've got some of the important members in OTO history. You've got OTO, International, FLH. They thought that OTO was a large organization before 1911 due to Lewis having read OTO's constitution. For 1911, it was a large organization, they thought. In 2015, we're still not a large organization.
Just because one person read the Constitution.
Yeah, and Lewis thought, wow, this seems legit, seems really fleshed out. And we just passed 4,000 members worldwide, which is great. But in 1911, we're lucky to have 4 members.
Yeah, that's still considered a small university.
I know. Yeah, so Lewis had some amusing projections onto OTO. But interestingly, as far as he knew, Royce had these Rosicrucian bona fides. He was from Germany. That's really where Rosicrucianism developed and originated. And Royce was tapped into all the continental Freemasonry of the time. He was thick with it, and it was a successor to John Yarker. So Lewis was kind of onto something from a perspective, but he took it and ran with it in kind of an unreasonable and ridiculous direction. Yes, there's more from the White Book deed. Note the reference to the 1906 Constitution, and there's the Salem Cross right there. AMORC goes to links to distance themselves from Crowley. They indicate that they received an OTO connection from Royce. Lewis claimed that Crowley appropriated authority in OTO from Royce without permission. You see, he's kind of leaning on Franz Hartmann, who he indicated was a member of the German and Austrian Rosicrucian jurisdiction. Hartmann was also a 9th degree member and co-founder of OTO, which wasn't mentioned. Clymer claimed that Van Eckartshausen and Franz Hartmann were not Rosicrucians, and that Lewis plagiarized their works. Lewis admitted to using their work as supplementary reading and indicates that he gave credit to the authors. He presents proof that both men were Rosicrucians. So, I'll kind of wrap things up here. I just wanted to present some of this interesting documentary evidence here. But as you can plainly see, the occult culture has been rife with conflict for a very long time. This is nothing new that we're dealing with. Maybe this will give everyone a bit of comfort as they're dealing with interpersonal conflict at the local body level. Put things into perspective. It's disappointing to me that the name of such an inspiring brotherhood was dragged through the mud in such a sensationalistic manner. The Rosicrucians, the foundational documents have inspired me since day one in my journey. This is exactly the reason why the Brothers of the Rosy Cross have always kept their secrets safe through the use of the 4th power of the Sphinx. I also find it fascinating that the authority of the 2 largest Rosicrucian orders in America derive either directly or indirectly from our holy order, Ordo Templi Orientis. Thank you. And I'll have these references and hopefully some of these images available in the proceedings book whenever that's done. Any questions, briefly? This is thinking. All right, before he comes up with something I can't answer. Thank you, everyone.